Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Adventures in the Advising podcast. My name is Ryan Sheckle, and we have a great episode today. We're going to meet some folks who went on a bit of a journey, I'd say, with institutional restructuring and rethinking the way that work can be done in academic advising and student success. But wherever you're at, whatever you might be doing, especially today, as you're listening to this episode, we're just glad that you joined us. You know, it's not often that we think about the way we feed ourselves, the things that we do to sort of fill our cup, as it were, and just taking the time to hear other people's perspectives, to consider the work that we do and the way it can be done, and maybe learn a little bit, be inspired a little bit. If nothing else, just reflect on it. That's really valuable. It's one of the reasons why we do the thing that we do here on this podcast, is to give folks a chance to really enrich the work that they do and the experience they have doing it, so we can be full, whole people. And so we're going to bring on our panelists. We have Steven Schaffling and his team from the College of Arts and Sciences at Syracuse University. And when we have a panel, it's always a chance to not read a bio and actually just talk and get to know each other. So, Steve, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll move on to Cindy, and then Molly and Ryan. Just tell us a little bit, welcome back, Steven, just a little bit about your role that you're in now and kind of how you got there in your higher ed journey.
Great. Thanks for having us, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I've been the Assistant Dean of Student Success at Syracuse University for the College of Arts and Sciences for almost 8 years now. I came into this role prior. I served as the Director of University Advising for Drexel University in Philadelphia. And, I was sort of tasked with building something different, building something new, which has 8 years later has resulted in this integrated human capital version of advising, where we deliver academic advising and career advising through one advisor with an assigned caseload that is primarily derived by level and academic program, right? And so there's a whole ton that's beyond that, and I think we'll get into it in the conversation. But I'm happy to be here and happy to have the conversation about what we're doing up here at Syracuse.
Yeah, to signpost up for our listeners, Stephen was on episode 160, along with Ling LeBeau, talking about their approach with international students. And we recognized the opportunity to learn more about Stephen's role and the experience in the College of Arts and Sciences, just from an academic advising perspective and student success point of view. So we wanted to invite more of Stephen's colleagues to talk through their experiences. And so, Cindy, could you introduce yourself and tell us about your role and how you got there?
Happy to. Good morning. My name is Cindy Zazzara. I am one of the assistant directors for our upper division team. I have been with Steve through this whole journey. I've been at Syracuse University for 15 years, all within the College of Arts and Sciences in Maxwell. And I've held a couple of positions within, starting out in our records department, and then moving on to advisor, and then the role that I'm currently in. Working also with the first year team and now the upper division team. So I've been through it all. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you, Cindy. And Molly, could you tell us about your role and how you got there?
Sure. My name is Molly Klock. I'm one of the advisors in the Office of Student Success for the College of Arts and Sciences in Maxwell School. My journey to higher ed is as a career changer. I loved working in higher ed. In my undergrad, I went to SUNY Oswego and I studied meteorology, and I was very career driven. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And then a couple years into my career, I decided that I needed to find something new. So I've worked in STEM fields, I've worked in education, and I came to advising after being an orientation leader and all of those higher ed things in my undergrad, but not really thinking that it could be a career track until I came into advising. So that's how I got here.
Fantastic. So it's always nice to meet another Ryan. As I was saying earlier, we're slowly taking over the world, one Ryan at a time. But Ryan, tell us a little bit about your role and how you ended up where you are now.
Well, thanks so much for having us, Ryan. We really appreciate it. I actually originally came from Canada, so I did my undergrad in Canada. But like Molly, I actually came from the classroom. I came from the K-12 world to higher ed. And I think like so many advisors, and Steve mentioned human capital, like so many of us, we come from diverse backgrounds and have lots of amazing career experiences that we bring to our advising, which makes it especially relevant for an integrated advising approach. But I've had the great pleasure of being at Syracuse. I've been on the first year team. We have a designated first year team that we advise first year students. And I was happy to start there, which was a great fit for me coming from the classroom where I taught grade 12 students. It was kind of like the other side of where we had been trying to get our students to go for so long. So it was really a great experience. And then I've also been able to be a lead advisor working, in pre-law, specifically doing pre-law advising, which has been really great. And now I'm an assistant director. So I've been able to touch different pieces of what our office does so well. So I've been really fortunate to be able to get to touch on all of those different areas.
Well, fantastic. And I know as we go through our conversation today, we're going to learn about the nature of the work and how it's structured now. But Steve, I was wondering if we could start talking about the history of things, like this reorganization and this process of integrating 3 offices into an office of academic and career advising. Like, how did that come about? And did anything shift culturally or structurally that just hadn't been the case before?
Sure. I mean, I'd love to set it up and then let Cindy offer some perspective from someone who went through that change and is still here, thankfully, with me today in an assistant director role, right? So essentially, the office was structured previously in a more regularized way. And what I mean by that is that there was a unit of academic advisors, there was a small career services unit of 1 to 2 people, and then there was a unit of, Cindy will refer to them as the records unit, which were the hardest working, lowest paid people in the college, because what they did was essentially process all of the paperwork and the business processes and certified degrees for the 5,000 students that we support. And essentially part of what triggered the change was honestly, there was an external consultant review, and the main thing that came back was that the structure for career services wasn't serving students. And the vision was, how do we take this and realign it in such a way that we create the career services so that it is better serving arts and sciences and humanities and social sciences students today? And what came out of that was a caseload model where it is integrated, so Molly serves as the academic advisor for a lot of biology students, but also the career advisor. And so she's the person who's certifying their degree. She's the person that's helping sure that they're on track with their plan. But she's also the person that's helping them think about all of the many co-curricular opportunities and career programmatic opportunities that the college and the university offers her students. And what that does is it lowers the hurdle. It lowers the bar for a student to connect the dots on the conversation, right? As opposed to having a siloed conversation over here and then having to carry that over to this person and have a conversation here. What the model does is that the academic plan affects the career plan, and the career experiences and the co-curricular experiences affect the academic plan. And it goes back and forth. And the ability to have that conversation, navigate that conversation with a single person lowers the hurdle for a student. And the final thing I'll say is that I think that that's integral in 2025. I think that students are asking, having tough kitchen table conversations with their parents about where they're going and what they're going to do. And I think it's absolutely incumbent upon offices of student success and advising to move into this type of role in order to have a much more holistic conversation with students so that they can navigate and articulate that once they leave our office and leave working with us. I think the final thing that I'll say is that all that I just said encompasses a redefinition of what advising is. And when I first got here, there was a very structured definition of what people thought advising should be or what it was. And it wasn't incorrect. It's just not necessarily what the strategic direction was where we needed it to be. Right. And I'm Cindy, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add relative to that, but you lived through that with me.
I did. I think the word that you used that I would touch on is holistic. I don't think the prior model, we were really seeing students holistically. We would have a conversation, the advisors would have a conversation about the academic piece. I would have a conversation maybe, but they weren't required to meet with me. So I would be doing everything behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, when I couldn't certify a degree, I'd never met this student. So here I am saying, I'm so sorry you can't be certified, but you've never met with me. We don't know where you're going career-wise. And every time we would have a conversation, it was sending you to a different office on the university, which it's a big university, and we would lose them along the way. So I think the biggest thing and the thing that has worked the best is that we're holistically working with students.
Right. And I know our next question is still in this vein of the shift, the adjustment. I certainly can hear the argument for the benefit of the student. We've had conversations on my own campus about how many times someone has to share their story, with how many different people and ways that they end up just sort of losing the plot because they're just saying the same thing over and over again. But I guess for your on-campus colleagues and stakeholders, how did y'all make the case that a single advisor delivering both academic and career outcomes, handling the sort of record side of it, wouldn't dilute maybe say the quality of any of those services? Were there any particular tools that maybe help reset expectations for students and advisors?
Right. So I'd be happy to start with that, and Ryan, Molly, you could talk to any one of them if you'd like that you've created along the way. But I'll say that I use the term advisor tools all the time, and that there are very few advisor tools that are off the shelf that we can go buy and plug in. And so being someone who started as a professional staff academic advisor at the beginning of my career, I carry that perspective with me through everything. So it is constantly my perspective that the advisor experience is very parallel to students, but not identical. Advisors can very well represent what students are dealing with, but building tools for advisors so that we increase their efficiency so that they're more able to get into the relational pillar and have the conversation. That's what prevents dilution of the services, right? I need to be able to build really quick utilitarian tools that when a student says something, an advisor can grab it immediately and say, all right, well, hey, you know what? Let's take a look at this and walk through it. And that is especially challenging when you consider liberal arts and sciences and social sciences and a diversity of career outcome, because many times we're trying to have that conversation from a backwards engineered perspective, right? What is it that you like? What is it that you enjoy? And then we're working that backwards because we're trying to help an anthropology major who might want to be in public service and one might want to go to law school and one might, right? Like, so there's this reverse engineering. If you don't have the tools in place, then yeah, I could perceive how that would dilute the service. And the other thing is a commitment in the change in the roles and to the caseload model. Like many other institutions are gonna, like our average caseload per advisor in this office is 250 students. And I think that actually is high. If I could fight to get that down to under 200, I would. But the other piece here is as I sort of intimated, is truly a commitment to an advising as teaching model and the relational pillar, right? I explain that to every advisor essentially on day one when we hire them. I explain how a university invests in an office like us, and if we're not putting that piece front and center, then what's our value add, right? Like we need to be doing that first. But the tools piece, as you mentioned, Ryan, is critical and a constant ongoing effort, right? There was something literally within the last week that I got frustrated with an advisor tool that we had, and I went and built something within like 3 hours. Like I went and built a new tool because I was like, I need my advisors to be able to actually have the conversations with students. Ryan, Molly, I don't know if you want to speak in any specificity to some of the tools that you personally have built.
Yeah, I think that one of the first things I learned in interviewing for this job was, and I got to interview with Cindy and our first year director, Elena. And like the first thing I learned was this was a culture of care. These are people who care about students. So that's the first primary responsibility, which really resonated with me as a former teacher. And then meeting with Steve in my first interview, Steve was like, we had this really in-depth conversation about like pedagogy and teaching strategies and, what I was doing to help my students get good scores on the Regents examinations. And I was like, wow, like this is really innovative. And I'm really excited about, using my teaching past and the skills and curriculum that I'd used in the past that I wanted to think about different ways of applying. And that mindset, like the innovative mindset, the ability to ask questions really started this kind of like concept like, okay, so we can take an approach to our students in advising where we can ask questions about how we do things and introduce, ideas and notions. When Molly came aboard, we both noticed like, how do advisors measure whether or not they're having success with their students? In particular, we were concerned about like career conversations and career outcomes. We talked to our students about their resumes. We talked to students about their careers, but we have great supports on campus that we want to make sure students are utilizing and understand are there. And so we started talking about like, well, how do we measure this? Like in the classroom, we'd give an exit ticket after we talked about these things. Did the students get that? Like, did they get what we were putting down? And so we just started talking about like, hey, could we develop a formative assessment where we could have and capture our students' data on what they perceived of our appointment to make sure that we're hitting the right note and we're doing really what we're aiming to do. So that started us down the road of like creating formative assessments. Steve was like so on board, gave us like one-on-one time, and Molly and I got one-on-one time to talk about, our reflection. We were able to like code data and just think about ways that we could extend and perhaps like, bring this to the whole office. And I'll let Molly talk on that as well. But having an open mindset and being curious was kind of like the cultural aspect that allowed some of those questions to happen so that you can start building tools. So like we started getting data on whether or not our students were in fact understanding the career supports and resources that we had available to them, and that they knew that we were the advisor to go to talk about those things. So it was like reinforcing what we're doing all the time. And it also led to, continued appointments, because I think that's a big part of that relational piece. And it's a big part of the career conversations, how they integrate with their academics. I mean, you need to keep coming back and having those conversations.
Yeah, Ryan, totally. I completely agree. I will also say that I started advising in April 2023. So this is the only model I've ever known. And truthfully, I can't imagine doing it any other way. It's just such a natural conversation with students of asking about academic questions. What's your end goal? What's your end goal? How do we get you to your path with your academics? I can't imagine doing them separately. And the robust tools that we have as an office make that really, really easy. Things that Ryan mentioned. Ryan and I kind of spearheaded a project using the Zoom whiteboard because, as Ryan said, the data suggests that we run a lot of virtual meetings out of our office. we don't have any purely online students, but a lot of our students are opting for virtual meetings. So we were curious, are they getting those same outcomes? And how do we make it easier for advisors to run those meetings? So we started building a bank of Zoom whiteboard tools so that advisors could have these conversations. They know the resources are there. They trust that they're there. So they don't have to use that precious brain space to think, okay, let me pull from this website and this tool. It's all just in one space. There's a book called Building a Second Brain that kind of speaks to this that I was telling Ryan about as we were using our whiteboard. It just lets us think more about the student and connecting with them. I'll give kind of a quick real world example. Last week, I met with a student who their main goal is, I want to add a math major to my plan. I love math. I'm never going to tell anybody not to add a math major. I fully support it. We were having that typical academic advisor conversation, how many credits, the classes, and the career advisor and me said, well, why do you want to add this math major? What kind of math do you need? And they were kind of taken aback, like, what do you mean? They ultimately want to go into research. And I said, well, what kind of math are we talking about? What kind of skills do you need to make yourself marketable in that position? And they weren't sure. Luckily, we have Alumni Connections, which is a bank of over 1,000 arts and sciences resources that want to meet with students. We have a Career Navigator webpage that gives you all of these accesses to connections. We have ONET, like a database of what people in that field are doing. And it just let me send the student with some autonomy to do some research, but also to give them the freedom to adjust their plan, to just make sure that they had the outcome that they wanted, which wasn't necessarily a math major. It was having the tools to be successful in the career that they wanted. And I couldn't have done that without the resources that we have as an office.
So we've talked about tools and resources as a type of support. Steve mentioned caseload and institutional investment as types of support. But what about additional training in this process? Were there other initiatives to help bring folks along for both academic advisors and people who maybe were in career roles, and to help them with this shift in the organization? Did anyone have to unlearn anything along the way as well?
I think probably folks. I think the biggest thing folks had to unlearn was what was the definition of their box, like meaning how the box was defined. This is advising, and that is not academic advising. That was the biggest thing. As far as training and development and along the way, I'll let everybody else on this call speak to how, like, at my core, I believe in professional development, and I put that forward, right? I think we bring external resources in from NACADA extremely regularly. We tap internal resources, so internal experts. There's a psychology department member who's an expert in motivational interviewing, as an example. We are in the last 8 years, we've probably completed 35 successful concurrent sessions at the annual. We produce scholarship and author stuff, but we bring in external sort of examples and excellence. And there's a professional development committee in the office that committee identifies. We survey the advisors. We don't just assess students, we assess the advisors and ask them what they need in which areas, and then we prioritize that. I mean, this Friday, I guess that's tomorrow, actually, now that I think about it. I'm delivering an hour session on how to use how to use Anthropic in order to build tools like that Claude can help us build advisor tools and how to use it. And so there's a constant commitment to professional development and training and we've had to, I could not, Cindy, I could not put a number on the commitment and the amount of training and development that we've done over the last 8 years. I don't know if you want to offer some perspective on that. I'd appreciate it.
I probably had the biggest learning curve of all because I was unlearning our past and then really starting fresh with adding everything in. And I think the key here is the professional development. It is constant. We are always sharing what we're learning. It's individualized too. If I feel I need something that maybe everyone else has had more training on, then I go out and find that source and then I bring it back to the group. So I think the training has been amazing. I also think that the onboarding process has helped tremendously with that. We have a very detailed process that we go through, and I think that helps tremendously. So it was a big learning curve at the beginning, but we all kind of did it together, and now we just pass it forward. So it's been great.
Cindy raises a great point about like the onboarding process. The old days of advising where they'd hand you the advisor manual and then hand you your caseload 24 hours later and say good luck, and that's not at all the positionality of this office. I mean, generally we don't give a new advisor a caseload for 6 weeks after they're at the earliest their first day, and there's a significant onboarding process that is not just informational, right? It's relational, and then it employs typical teaching techniques of shadowing and reverse shadowing and assessing conversations, right? And then everybody, the positionality, that relational component doesn't stop with the student, if that makes sense. That folks know that they can walk in my door and they walk into Cindy's door and they ask a question, right? And and we, in some ways, we are each other's best resource.
So, sounds like the structure's in place, the transitions happened, and we're trying to walk it and live it and have it be the current thing. Let's talk results. Is there anything specifically you'd like to share that you've seen that indicates that this is working? Is there anything that surprised you along the way as things being adopted or changing that weren't particularly expected?
Yeah, I'll tell you that. So we do regular summative assessment annually, and we're about to come into that phase. And so that has been something that over 8 years, that it's about the trend line over those 8 years, right? I'll give an example. When we first started in the model prior to the current setup, the academic advisors in the office would have told you we advise on the liberal arts core, and we don't advise on anything besides the liberal arts core. And so one of the learning outcome statements on the very first summative assessment was, my advisor helped me learn the requirements of the liberal arts core, and then a 5-point Likert scale. And the agree rate with that statement was only 58%. And so that told me from the jump the differentiation of the perspective of the advisors and that of the students. And like taking an assessment approach, it isn't evaluative, right? It isn't punitive. It's all right, we want them to learn the requirements of the core from us. What must we do differently so that they say, yeah, I learned that from you? And so you fast forward that 8 years later, and the agree rate, generally speaking, from 1,000 responses is about 85%. Another one that I use as a canary in the coal mine is we have a statement along the lines, a little bit more of an affective statement, but a statement along the lines of, I understand my advisor as a valuable resource in my education for things far beyond course registration. And the agree rate with that statement is, again, about 85%. From 1,000 responses annually. And so what that's telling me, as I always say, a canary in a coal mine, a sense of like the student's perspective on the value, the positionality, and what is it that they're getting from their advisor. So that the 5 courses I need next semester is the absolute minimum. It's the absolute baseline. And we're going beyond that, right? And I could sit here and talk assessment results for another hour and a half if you wanted, because everybody in this office knows that that's like what makes me excited. It's success, but I don't want to bore everyone.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the perspective that you're assessing. Like there's a ton of advisors who feel like the work alone is what they have capacity for. But if we're not reflective in our practice, and if we're not data informed in our practice, then we still have a practice, and we're also saying something about the value of the work that we're doing by leaving it unevaluated. But I'm curious if, from an advising perspective, this change structurally and the type of culture that you're developing, if you've noticed any differences in student behavior. not just, do they agree with a statement or not, but like, what do they do in the advising experience? Are they engaging earlier? Are they being more intentional? Are they just more confident advisees in the process? What are you all seeing from a student behavior point of view?
I don't mind starting. I would just say, one of the really great aspects. So we have a first year advising team, and they do a fantastic job of working with students at a first year level and really kind of like getting a sense of belonging and introducing them to career resources, both through advising, but also through things like our first year seminar course that we have, where advisors actually have a part in teaching that class. We call it home college experience, and they are able to kind of share advising resources and just get students comfortable with advising, because I think that's a huge aspect of both retention and student, just feeling like they're belonging on campus. They get a sense of the, navigational resources that they can utilize. But one of the first things we do as upper division advisors is we meet with students. Often the first meeting we have with our sophomores is for a resume review. And I think that that's so intentional when you think about a student coming in for we can say academic advising appointment, but you're actually coming down and you're going to talk about yourself. You're going to talk about your experiences in your past, where you've been. And I think that's so powerful, because the advisor is asking questions about you. We want to know, we're curious about where you've been, where you've worked, but also where you want to go. Where do you want to work? What are some of your career aspirations? And it's not too early for those conversations. It only informs, where we're going to be able to make suggestions academically and explore majors. If a student's undeclared, it just gives you all of those opportunities and ends to talk about the academics. But we're starting on the other side. We're starting with you as a person. And what do you have on that resume if you have one? And if you don't, we're going to work with you. So again, those questions are going to keep coming. We're going to use kind of Socratic questioning to kind of get students to reflect on, hey, these are really important questions I should be asking myself as part of this undergraduate experience.
I think the other thing I would note here is that as advisors, we're always looking for that lull. And I think the fact that we don't have the big swings, that the students are responding to this. They're coming in when they don't have to come in for a hold. They're coming in to just maybe do a resume review or talk about an immersion trip, not just necessarily what classes am I taking. Registration is tomorrow. So I think that really is where it shows, and where we feel it the most is that we're busy all the time, which is nice.
Right. I'll give some data behind Cindy's statement. I mean, we won't place more than, our population is 5,200 students. We won't place more than about 2,000 registration holds annually, but the office will complete 14,000 one-on-one student meetings annually. And so there's a thing in the industry right now where meeting with your advisor more correlates to retention and persistence. So there's this perception right now that you should just put an advising hold on every student every single semester. And I've seen this at the most recent annual last year. I saw multiple offices presenting on this, and I'm going, no, that's upside down. What you need to do is create the value add of the advising and the relational component and build a model from that perspective so that the student understands, I trust this person, I'm coming to this person, and I know that they're going to help me across this range of issues. So I mean, if the proof is in the pudding, right? That students come see us on the order of tens of thousands of times in a year, and we're not forcing them to.
Yeah, I think that the correlation of advising with an impediment to registration, it merits more consideration for sure. And I think also there's some benefit in the question of what's correlation, what's causation, right? Is somebody saw me, so they registered, really the argument we want to be making, or is it the student saw the benefit of the educational relationship, and so they saw me? But we won't get too philosophical with those bigger picture questions. I am really curious about holds models. We're evaluating it at our institution now, and I'm wondering about what results, we see. And I just know how often people say, well, you look at this number and then you see registration happen after that number. And I'm like, I don't know that that's the model for success for us.
It's not. I mean, I'll just, having lived it at multiple institutions, you want to, how should I phrase this succinctly? You want to use a scalpel to apply holds because you have finite advising resources. You want to apply your advising resources to the students you absolutely need it. And then you want to create a value differentiator for the larger population. And so that you're leaving room for the larger population to understand the value and come in and see you and have the type of conversation when and where they need it, and use a data-informed perspective for who's the student I really need to see right now, and help that student through. And it's this combination, and look, we had this approach led to the highest first to second year retention rate in college history, period, full stop. And it's due to the work in this office directly.
So the student that we really need to see, the student who perhaps some sort of atypical intervention is needed, for students who perhaps the environment isn't as equitable, or it's not necessarily built for particularly undecided students or international students, low-income students. Are you seeing your approach having an effect to sort of even things out and be a little bit more equitable with those students?
Precisely. So it's undecided, first gen, Pell Grant eligible, and international, at least here. And I would say an emerging topic that we probably don't have time to get into here is that, we've always known that males retain at a lower rate from first to second year, but there's an issue there with the larger institutional enrollment of males and it decreasing across the country. So there's another thing there, but yes, the long story short is that, we're applying resources and proactive high impact practices to diversification of the groups that might normally retain at a slightly lower rate than the average. And undecided is a great example. I'm an undecided liberal arts student in 2026. There's a ton of societal pressure. I always say when students go home for Thanksgiving break and their parents, aunts and uncles and family are asking them, okay, well, what are you going to do with that? And like the rack rate at Syracuse University is $85,000 a year. And if we're not proactively, intentionally building the human capital for that student through our advising practice so that they can go home and articulate the answer to that question and articulate how they're leveraging the university's resources to figure out the path, then we're sort of falling down. And what we're seeing is a significant increase in the persistence and retention in those groups. Like I said, it's undecided, first gen, Pell Grant eligible, and international.
So I know Molly said that this is the only model she knows of advising, and Cindy has said she had the biggest learning curve. So, from each of your perspectives, just looking back at things, are there any lessons you've learned from the reintegration or the first time integration that you feel is worth sharing with listeners or viewers from other institutions who might be thinking about doing the same thing? Like if they're considering this staffing approach or trying to scale it up, what's the most realistic first step? The things that you've learned and might be the low-hanging fruit.
I would say the first thing is to embrace the change. And I will admit I am a change adverse person, and it's night and day. I don't even actually like to think about how things were prior to Steve coming in, because I feel like this is the way we should do it. And it makes the most sense. And like I said, holistically, I know my students, and that, there's no price you can pay for that. That's amazing.
I'll add too that I think it ebbs and flows. I've only know integration. I firmly believe it, but there are some cases and situations where one takes hierarchy over the other. I'm not going to ask a senior what their plans are post-grad when we just found out that they may not graduate in May. Like, that is not the appropriate time for that question. Same with meeting with a sophomore who might not have very limited of their degree completion. Maybe we don't talk about the check boxes that you need to make. Maybe we really dig into what you want to do and what brings you joy and what your strengths are. So I think it's okay to let it ebb and flow. For me, it's really just a mindset primarily of, these are two big things that we have to consider: your academic success and your career success, and kind of using that formative assessment, that observation of what's the most appropriate. And like Cindy said, when you're the point of contact for your student and you're using that holistic model, you build that relationship, you get that read, and that comes a little bit more naturally as you get to know your students.
I would say too, I think, this may be anecdotal, but in combining, my different career experiences, but I feel like advisors are perfectly situated within that VUCA environment, that volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous career future, because oftentimes advisors have traversed that themselves. I think they often are coming to advising not because that was the thing that they took in undergrad and they thought they were going to be an advisor. They often have various, career experiences that really lend themselves to doing this kind of integrated approach. So we've been there, we can help students kind of navigate that, volatile career environment that they're facing as well.
Nice. Now I know everyone's going to be writing down VUCA. It's one of the notes. And I know also people are like, second brain. So I'm going to say it again because I wanted to remind myself, building a second brain. Speaking of volatility, there's so much in higher ed right now where it's hard to anticipate the future. It's hard to know where things are going to end up or what really is maybe the next big thing. So how have you seen your approach, this model evolving, especially with stuff like AI and that kind of stuff out there in the world? Like, where do you see the changes happening in what you've established so far?
I need to think about that because we're constantly changing and evolving. I'll say two things. One, just from the prior conversation, it's really important to recruit and retain the right people as advisors, and I think that's critical to everything that you've just asked. But I think that where we're at is approaching it from a perspective of like this model allows for so much more in the conversation, as we've discussed. And then what we're doing is we're trying to integrate student tools relative to AI. And I'll give an example, something that we built and we're piloting right now this spring is that it's above 80% of first round interviews occur essentially on Zoom now. And we made an investment in a virtual like mock interviewing tool that essentially is set up similar to Zoom, and it's AI integrated. Okay. The AI will give direct feedback on the interview performance. And for us, what that does is sets up a scenario that is similar, likely to what students will encounter in their very first interview, because so many places are doing it through Zoom. And it lets us scale to, if 5,000 students want to take advantage of it, whether it's to go on an immersion trip that we're running or an internship or a first entry-level job interview, right? It lets us scale and create that scalability for our students and be cognizant of what's the experience that they're likely to face when they go into that interview, right? Does that make sense? So we're trying to change our practice to be representative of what students will have to deal with next. Molly, I'm sorry, go for it.
No, that was me realizing that I didn't unmute after my last question. Sorry about that. But also back to our resume initiative, I think, again, we have a wonderful AI tool that I think it's no secret that students are using AI on resumes like all the time. But more often than not, I think it generates a conversation, especially for a student that maybe doesn't nail it on the first try and they get that score back and they're like, oh, I don't really know I need some help here, that's when they come to us. So it's more facilitating and guiding our conversations than replacing it, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I know listeners for this podcast know that we're continuing to ask questions about AI. There's a lot out there that's being said. And one of the certainties is that if we're not in the conversation, and if we're not participating in it, then we'll be on the outside looking in. But I always love getting to meet new people and learn more about the way that we do our work, and we can, and that sort of stuff. But I also like to acknowledge that we're not just about our work, that we're parts of communities, and we have perspectives that maybe are just a normal human being sort of thing. But before we transition to that, I don't know if Ryan, you had other comments about AI that you wanted to share, or anything in particular on the AI front.
Well, I'm super interested in it. I'm currently doing my EdD, and it's an area I'm very interested in advising, obviously. So I'm really trying to think hard about the intersections between AI and advising. And, of course, I think like everyone is concerned about, the threat to positions, right? Like I read an article yesterday about how, what is going to be safe from AI. And I think the thing that we've really focused on in our office, and we haven't been afraid to either to experiment with AI. I have a hilarious experiment with AI that could not answer one of my questions, and I just spent a couple of days trying to get it to acknowledge that it was making things up. There are going to be those experiences, and we're going to certainly need to test it given our own knowledge. But I think one of the things that we think a lot about in our office, and in the virtual office space that Molly and I talked about with using whiteboards, is how do we cognitively offload some of the informational pieces that advisors have to hold in their heads, right? Like we have so much that we have to remember, think about it, the academic rules, like how it intersects with different departments and the rules for every major, and all of those academic requirements and all the career things all the career supports and things we need to hold together. How do we offload some of those things? And if we can do that, that will free up that relational competency, right? We talk and think about how to be more relational with our students. And I think that's really where the focus is going to have to be with AI. How does that free up space for advisors to be relational? That's going to empower better, stronger conversations that are going to help our students. And it's going to, that's the dream. I think that's really where we want to utilize AI. Really think about how that tools can be helpful in that regard.
Right. And Ryan Shekel, like if you're not on the bus early, helping steer the bus where it's going, standing in front of the bus saying, no, don't go there, is not a successful alternative position. Right. And so I think that position advising needs to position itself on the relational pillar, and truly the learning outcomes of, all right, what are students getting from us? And they need to demonstrate it, and they need to do it now. And then they need to help steer the bus on how AI can help decrease the anxiety or the struggle or the hurdles for students who have to navigate the same 7 systems that advisors need to navigate in order to add classes. Right. And so what AI can do is help that piece of it, if you're positioned in advising to do the other stuff.
Absolutely. And I think one of the through lines for our conversation today as we wrap up is it doesn't matter necessarily what the technology is, what the quote unquote structure or rules or organizational design is, if it's not about us getting back to that human component, right? Being student-centered, being learner-centered, recognizing the humanity in the relationships that we have. If that isn't the focus, then it's really easy to lose ourselves. And it's thrilling to hear that the integration of the academic and career and sort of record sides of things in your college and for your folks is working. And I want to encourage our listeners and anyone who might be viewing this later, to connect with this and really pursue that question is, am I being supported? Am I finding the support that I need to be the best human I can be in this educational relationship? So Steve and team, Molly, Ryan, Cindy, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being on the podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And believe me, there's certainly more conversations to be had.
Thank you.